So the text this morning that we'll be in is 2 Chronicles 24. There will be some background given from 2 Chronicles 23. And I'd like to tell this story as a character from the Old Testament. So please join me in your Bibles. You can follow along, or you can just sit back and enjoy as we hear from an Old Testament character. Have you ever served a good master? Well, whoever he was, he's not as good as mine. Oh, I haven't introduced myself. I'm Jehoshaphat, and I am the hand to the king. Well, I was hand to the king. Now, I guess you probably haven't heard of me, but surely soon you will. And undoubtedly when you do, my name won't be given to you in the best light. So let me take a moment to clear the record before my name is tarnished in the annals of history. Oh, who is the king of Judah, you ask? You must not be from around here. The king is Joash. The king was Joash. Now, if you haven't even heard anything of Judah, surely you've heard of David. King Joash is the son of Ahaziah, the bloodline of David. And just like David, who served for 40 good, long years, my king too, Joash, he served for 40 good, long years. Now, our kings here in Judah are all good, unlike those of the north up there with the deserters. Well, okay, you caught me. They're not all good. They haven't all been good. After Solomon, there was Rehoboam, and he wasn't very good. Then there was Abijah, and I guess he wasn't very good either. Then there was Asa. He was a good king. And Jehoshaphat, he was good too. Then came his son, Jehoram. And he was wicked. He followed the ways of his father Ahab. And then came his son, Ahaziah, who also followed in his father's footsteps, Jehoram. He did wickedly in the sight of Yahweh, and he paid with his life. You can imagine his mother wasn't too thrilled about her son's passing. I've never understood why we don't have a word for a woman who's lost her child. We call a woman who's lost her husband a widow, and a girl who's lost her parents an orphan, but a woman, this woman, Athaliah, who lost her royal son, she was a maniac. She was crazy. I mean, I know most women, they're a little crazy. But this woman, she was the craziest. Believe me. What I mean is that she came and she took all the heirs to the throne. She slayed them one by one by one. All of them washed out. And the bloodline of David receded as if a wave from the shore. All hope was lost. The bloodline of David, gone. Or so we thought for 7 years. And Athaliah, this usurper, self-crowned over Judah, not only decimated the bloodline of David, she desecrated the temple with the idols of Baal. And things got worse year after year as she sat upon this throne that she had taken that was not rightfully hers. Then in the 7th year, there were whispers that a king, a true heir, had survived. The bloodline of David lived on. And so, he was gathering ranks to himself. The priest Jehoiada, on his behalf, was gathering people because the king was strong enough now to sit on his throne. And so naturally, I enlisted. I'm strong after all. Young man, 20 years old. So there I was, joining the ranks. And Jehoiada was the one strategizing the battle plan. And I impressed him with my strength and my tact. Okay, mostly my tact. And then he was assigning us roles, and he called out my name. He said, Jehozabad, you will command the third of the army that will protect the king's house as we go and seize Athaliah, because you are the most cunning of them all. Even though you are not the strongest, you are the most cunning. Ha! Not the strongest. At least he recognized my intellect. And so, we did it. Athaliah was seized and slain by Jehoiada in the courts in front of the temple. And the feast. Oh, the feast. We all ate and drank to our fill from the greatest wines and breads and meats from all the land. We had victory that day and we celebrated. And then Jehoiada was calling out names of people who would serve in special roles to the king. I listened intently for my name. Then there it was. Jehozabad. Huh, it's me. Here we go. Jehozabad, for your service this day, you will serve at the right hand of the king. Oh, the right hand of the king. I'm going to live in the palace. I'm excited. That whole night, I could not sleep. I was so excited at the thought of giving counsel to this king, all the things that I would tell him to do, and he would listen. So I did. I counseled him. This boy of 7 grew up. Some years later, one night, I was laying in my bed, and I heard a rustle in the king's chamber, the neighboring room. So I grabbed my sword and rushed to his chamber, and I saw a glow coming out into the hallway from his room. And as I turned the corner and looked in, I stepped forward and said, there I saw the king, sitting at his table with a parchment stretched out in front of him, the lamp illuminating it in front of him. He said, pardon the intrusion, my king, but what troubles you to be awake at such an hour as this? My good Jehozabad, Jehoiada has given me the scroll, the plan of the temple that was passed down from David to Solomon. And I know now that it must be restored. And so nobody could get it out of his mind. He was obsessed with restoring the temple. So shortly he gathered the priests and the Levites to himself, and he instructed them, go to the cities of Judah, collect money from all the people annually, and do it quickly. I don't know what people think about money where you're from, but we in Judah, we hate taxes. I hate taxes. It's my money. So the priests knew this, and they left the king's presence, and they gathered to themselves. They had a discussion. One of them spoke up and said, well, he said do it quickly, but he didn't give us a deadline. So, and it's almost the turn of the year, so I imagine he must have meant next year. We'll start next year, yeah. And they all gave their signs of agreement. So it was. They didn't collect any money year after year. So you can imagine the shock when I sat in on a royal conference with Jehoiada, the high priest, when Joash wanted to take account of the money that had been gathered all these years. Jehoiada, tell me, when do you expect that we can commence the reparations to the temple, the house of Yahweh? Give me an account of all the money that you've overseen the Levites collecting. The blood rushed out of the wrinkled face of Jehoiada, the high priest. Your Majesty, what money? Oh no, I did not want to be there. The time just stood still. And the king's expression changed to a white-hot fury. Jehoiada, why have you not overseen the Levites and the priests collecting money for the tent of the testimony as Moses levied it upon the people of Israel? "My king, if you will permit me to leave, I will do as you have commanded." And so he was allowed to leave, and the money was collected. And man, was it collected. They set a chest outside beside the altar, and money poured in. I'm not talking about your guys' kind of money. The little coins, the little tin coins you call money. I'm talking chunks of precious metal, ingots of gold, silver, ore, of iron and bronze, metals put into this chest. Day after day it was emptied, filled, emptied, filled, emptied, filled. And that money was used to pay the best stonemasons and carpenters and metal workers. And they came in, and they worked diligently, and they repaired the temple. And all the days of Jehoiada, King Joash did what was right in the sight of Yahweh. And the people rebuilt the temple. And I remember the first glance that I caught of its finished work. Oh, the beauty, the ornate metals and lamps, the golden lamps on the silver lampstands. Have you ever seen a golden table? I hadn't. There's golden tables and silver tables all the way down to the utensils and the pans of silver and gold. Jehoiada oversaw the details that he had learned from the plans of the temple. He made sure that everything was restored to its exact specifications. For Joash did what was right in the sight of Yahweh all the days of Jehoiada the priest. And the people brought offerings, and there were burnt offerings conducted all the days of Jehoiada the priest. But all the days of Jehoiada the priest came to an end. That was a sad day. You see, the king was in mourning in his chamber. He didn't take audience from anybody. And so he left the burial responsibilities to us, his servants. And we buried Jehoiada among the kings, the great kings, beside David, in the city of David. And then when I returned to the palace, I noticed that some men were kneeling at the king's throne, and the king had returned from his chamber. These men bowed, dressed in scarlet and purple. Their hands were filled with bands of precious metal, studded with gems of every color that you could imagine. They gave counsel. Our king, Jehoiada, was a great advisor to your throne. And if it please you, we would like to offer our humble counsel. Now, Jehoiada was a great advisor to your throne, but how far did he spread your borders? Jehoiada was a great advisor, but how much revenue did he bring to your crown? He was a great advisor and a great man of God, but how much did his God repay you for repairing his temple? King Joash, we have spoken to our oracles, to our gods, and they say that the signs show that it is time for you to leave the God of Jehoiada. For the God of Jehoiada has left you. He has forgotten his promises to his people. And we offer these gifts to you as a token of our condolences for the loss of your closest friend. And as they stood, the song of the jingling of their jewelry seduced the king's ear. And their servants hoisted a trunk that was encrusted with gems and set it at his feet. And they left. I saw these princes. I recognized them coming in frequently now. I recognized them from the days of Athaliah. And it was under Jehoiada that they had been silenced. But now that the days of Jehoiada had ended, they were visiting the king with frequency. And I lamented how quickly a man who had at one time been so influenced by godly counsel soon abandoned it to flattery. Day after day they counseled him. Before you know it, I saw him going with them to worship their idols, the Asherim, and their wooden idols. And he took the scrolls of the Mosaic law and handed them to me to return to the priests. He had abandoned godly counsel, and now he was abandoning the house of Yahweh and the worship of our God. But still, Yahweh was faithful. He sent prophet after prophet after prophet to speak to the king, and the king would have no part of it. He instructed me, Jehozabad, take these prophets and do away with them, because I will not listen to their venomous lies. And so, he didn't take counsel with any of the prophets. But still they spoke to the people. One of them, Jehoiada's son, Zechariah, came and spoke to the people. He said, Thus Yahweh has said, why have you forsaken the commandments of Yahweh and not prospered? Because you have forsaken your God, Yahweh has also forsaken you. And the people were enraged. And they went to the king and told him their reports. Our king, a prophet, speaks treason to your name. He says that it is your indiscretion that has caused Yahweh to forsake you. So the king told me to oversee the stoning of this prophet, the son of Jehoiada. Stone after stone they cast at the prophet. And I just watched. His face cracked, his bones crushed, till finally he gurgled out his last words, blood just pouring from his face. May Yahweh see and avenge. In the turn of that year, the very next year, the Arameans came with a small army and defeated us, a great army. What do you know? His words were coming true. And those officers, the officials, the princes who came and counseled the king, they were all killed. And the king was left sick in his bed. That's when we did it. I went with another servant of the king into his chamber. His face was pointing the other way, towards the idols he had set up in his room. His breath was heavy from the wounds that he had obtained, and I ended it with my knife. That was last night. So we are here, and we buried him. I had dreamed of the day that we would bury him among the kings beside David. But here we are. My great king is buried in an unmarked grave. I don't know how long I will have to live, because surely the king's guards are looking for me, the killer of the king. But I'd like to impart these words because they might be my last. If you see a godly man leaving godly counsel for the counsel of flattery and pagans, warn him. Remind him of Joash, who fell from power because he had abandoned godly counsel. If you see a man leaving the house of God and the worship of God, admonish him back so that he might return to God. Remind him of Joash, who fell because he had left the worship of God. And if you see a man who has abandoned not only the worship and the counsel of God, but also the word of God through the prophets, and he won't listen to any man, pray for him to Yahweh, that he might restore this man to himself. And if you one day are looking at your reflection in a pool and see that you are becoming that man, turn back. Because godly leaders fall when they abandon God.